Hi, everyone. So glad you could all be here. This amazing show was put together by Matt III, and lots of hours of work, obviously, to bring these wonderful artists together. Unfortunately, one of our artists couldn't make it today. She's got a sick baby, so we know that's a challenge. And I just want to be sure you all know Matt Luther. He is our associate curator here at the gallery, and Rissa Martinez and Abby Aceves. Did I say your last name right? Yeah. Yes. Good. And I hope you enjoy. These works are magnificent. I just hope you. I've already seen it affect my students in my pigment class. They're already on it and understanding it, and they're doing collages now, and they look like, well, you'll see them tomorrow. You have affected them, which is awesome. So, welcome you all, and here's Matt. I'm Leslie, by the way.
Yeah, that's Leslie.
Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Glad to see everyone here. And I'll just kind of start off. Obviously, I'm going to kind of ask a few questions and hopefully instigate some really good questions from you all as well at the end. So if you don't mind, I would like to just kind of start off if you kind of introduce yourself and a little bit of your background as far as where you grew up from, where you're at now, and then as well as any information about school, where you went to school.
Yes. So I grew up in Ventura County. If you know it, it's like 3 hours away towards the beach. Like if you're going to Santa Barbara. So I grew up there. It's a very small kind of community. And I went straight into a 4-year college while I had a 2-year-old. I went to Otis College of Art and Design over by LAX for my undergrad. And I just recently completed my Master's of Fine Arts at the Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland, Oregon. And I did like the low residency program because I was at the time a full-time teacher teaching high school art, and I would go there for the summer residencies.
Hello. You guys hear me? Yep, cool. I'm Abby Aceves. So I'm originally from Mexico, Guadalajara, but I was born in Nogales, which is kind of like in the border. When I was a little kid, I was brought here and raised in LA until I was around 12. And then I kind of started going back and forth until my puberty years. I just stayed in Mexico, Guadalajara, with where my whole family is from. That's where I studied fashion, so I have a fashion background. I tried studying art. I didn't get in. It's a paperwork situation. But I think it was destiny. So I did kind of go into fashion, and I pursued it. I had my own brand. And then little by little, kind of art just, started calling me back. And I started coming here again to visit my mom. And that's when I realized I kind of had like a better opportunity to embrace that part of myself. So I've been here for the past 7 years. Yeah. So I came back. I usually say like, like I was raised in Guadalajara and I brought here, as an older, but thinking about it, I was like, no, it was just going back and forth. So you asked me kind of like from everywhere.
Yeah, it's important to note the differences in identity. If I'm not mistaken, Abby identifies as Mexican, whereas I'm Mexican-American, though I prefer the term Chicana. So I was completely raised here. I was born here. My parents were from Mexico. So yeah.
Are you both full-time professional artists at the moment? Do you have a day job? Something else that you're working on?
I am a broke ass. I don't know if I can cuss, but you get the rest. So I was working full-time as a high school art teacher for the 6 consecutive years, and then I became too disabled to work full-time, so I had to take this year off. So I guess you could say that I'm a full-time artist, but I have yet to profit off of it, so our work is for sale.
That's right. Same. You could say I'm a full-time artist. I've been for the past 2 years. When I came here, I was here with a visa, so of course I couldn't work. But I was working on the side as a housekeeper, and I did that for 4 years, kind of make a living. And then when it started getting better with art, I was pushed. They like, you can do this. Like, if you're really, like, really good, and I think you can do it. And it got into my Delulu head, and I was like, I can do this. So I've been doing it for the past 2 years. It's been a struggle. It's been a really, really struggle. But it was the best decision. I'm currently doing something for LA County, an apprenticeship. So it's a paid job. So that's kind of helping me a lot. Yeah.
Is fashion still a part of your life? Are you still making?
I love it. Like, I love fashion and the runways and the brands and all of that. I love it. I don't like the superficial ambient of it, and also where the world's at right now with like pollution and so many clothes already here. Honestly, I've been thrifting for a while now because you find really cool stuff. You get to find really unique things, and you kind of don't put into more trash in the world. And because I'm poor. So
I would, I worked briefly in fashion as a graphic designer because that's how I started out. When I went to Otis, I got a graphic design degree, worked for a few fashion companies like Diamond Supply Co. and things like that. And I will say there is like a lot of like superficial kind of weird attitudes, and just wasn't for me in the long term. So, but it definitely comes through in Abby's work.
Yeah, it's always something very present in my work. I'm very drawn to the textures of it, to the colors, anything I can touch. Like lately, I've been working with a lot of epoxy clay. I barely started incorporating actual leather to my pieces. And I just realized like it's just like a whole experience, not just being able to touch it, but smell it. So it's just like a whole thing, not just visually.
Could you talk a little bit about like how you develop your work? Like, does it start with a sketch, an idea? Does it come more from a conceptual area? Is it more about a body of work or an individual piece of work?
For me, the term body of work was something I wrestled with for many years until I went to graduate school. I didn't feel like my work was unified, especially the ceramics. Now I feel like they're a body of work. But for me, the concepts, I mean, I do sketch. They're atrocious sketches. They don't look like an actual artist sketchbook. But I can understand them, and that's what matters. I sketch, but I also, like, I'm bipolar, so I have, like, manic, crazy dreams at night if I do sleep at all, and I get these night terrors. And eventually in the morning, I'm just like, I have an idea. And so that's usually what comes of it. But I do really focus on my process. Like, I'm very meticulous about every stage. And other artists always say, what are you doing? You just do it. And I'm like, no. I got to plan it. And I think that's the graphic designer side of me. But I love it.
I think you said something very important and about the process. And I think as an artist, that's actually the most important part of doing a piece, the process, not the final result of it. So it's just what, like, the final process is what took you there, but like you learn so much while doing the piece.
It's cathartic, and for at least for me. So it's much like going into a mosh pit and just like releasing your energy. Like, I talk about like a lot of deep stuff, trying not to cuss, a lot of deep stuff that is very emotionally close to me, which I think comes across in the pieces. So for me, it feels like I'm working through emotions and just getting it out there, and then boom, done. Put that away. Compartmentalize that. That's done.
For a while, I kind of based it on, because I would do group shows, so they usually give you a theme. Like the theme is this, and you kind of work around that. And I think I would do compositions. I do Photoshop. I'm glad I paid attention in school when I was in fashion. Because I was like, I'm not going to need this. I'm in fashion. But I do. So I kind of build a composition on Photoshop just to get like everything where I think it's supposed to be. Because for me, it's harder to kind of just sketch it out. I kind of do need to see, play with it and move it around, colors, everything. And once I have a visual of it, like the composition, the collage I made on Photoshop, then I'll do the sketch based on that to have that organic feel of it. So that was a little bit more when I was doing group shows. But since last year, the last months of last year, I had the opportunity to work on more of a personal work. So by then I was able to kind of, and it's like a cliche, you know, like, oh, just like what I'm feeling, which was really cool. And lately I just been doing that. I kind of let the emotions, the feelings of what I'm doing and just let them be. And it's kind of a mirror when you're doing something and you let them be, because at the end of the day, the process of it, and then you reflect on it, you see what you made. And I was like, okay, what is this saying about me? So it's very interesting to have that switch of, you know, working when you have a subject matter, like, oh, I have to work with this subject, rather than, okay, let me dig inside, let it be, put it out there, and then analyze, what is this? But I do try to make like a composition of it.
I think what you said is important, because when we work under confines of like group shows and stuff, you kind of feel like when you're starting out in the art world, you feel like confined to it almost. And it's very important. My best advice that I can give all you young artists out there: learn what the rules are and then break them. Okay, I'm serious. Like, once you let go, once you understand like the basic techniques, how things are done, you have that background knowledge, but then you can kind of just be like, okay, now I know, and I'm going to do it my way, and kind of release those like restraints that you feel like you're putting on yourself, and just do what you do. And that makes a big, big difference. And when I started doing that, I noticed a shift in like getting more shows and just kind of being more involved in the community that I actually wanted to be in, rather than like some more superficial gallery kind of scene. So you got to find your own path, but that's my best advice I can give you. Learn the rules, then break them.
You mentioned a couple things about it being cathartic and cathartic. Say that right? But the process, kind of learning from that, kind of letting it kind of take you. I think home and identity were kind of the base foundation of the show. Can you talk a little bit about your own identity and how that kind of plays into your thinking of the process and how that develops?
Yeah, sure. So I am many things. I'm Chicana. I'm queer, bisexual. I am a mother. I come from a very, very, very Catholic background. And if you know anything about Mexican Catholicism, I am the black sheep. And I'm also obviously very fun rock, if that's not obvious. And it does play into my work, because I kind of find the intersection of all these things. And when I found that, I realized that there's a lot of people who are feeling the same things that I am. Like, Catholicism puts this really heavy restraint on you, and you feel judged in so many capacities, and you were raised that way. It's just kind of ingrained in your soul, even if you're not Catholic yourself. And obviously queerness is not really super accepted yet in Catholicism. We're getting there, but, you know, it takes time. And then punk rock obviously is basically saying the opposite of what everybody else is doing and saying, right? So it's an interesting intersection, and I think that's really where my work is. It's right there, that intersection, and exploring how those identities cross over.
My identity, you know, I'm Mexican, so I've talked about this before. Sometimes I get invited to Chicano shows, and I reject them because I don't identify as a Chicana, even though they, you know, I get asked, but what is a Chicana for, like, to you? Like, there is no rules to be one, and it's given me, you know, the space to think about it, because for the meanwhile, I just kind of want to, like, give that space to other people, because I was here as a kid, but it's harder. You don't really, like, build an identity, you know, as a kid. You're just more interested in playing and, you know, being at school. So I grew up when I was like 13, I spent my time at my grandmother's house. So all of my work really speaks about my Mexican heritage and growing up with my grandmother with this big house, a lot of plants, a lot of animals. So that's something that you'll see reflected in my work. I also grew up with my mom being queer. She's like a super butch lesbian. So for me, the queer identity, me also being bisexual, was never something relevant because it was just something so normal for me. Like when I've spoken about it, people kind of like, oh my God, like your mom's gay? Oh, yeah. But like for me, it's just very normal. So usually when I speak about myself, for me, it's not something relevant for my work because it was just there all the time since I was a kid. But it is something very important. Yeah, I don't know if I answered that.
So probably have a two-part question, but I think the first part is really spikes. So spikes come into play in both your works in different ways, both hard and soft, and both of clay and metal. Can you talk about that that development in your work and what that means?
Sure. I don't know that I have like a super like deep answer for that. Obviously, spikes are very important to punk rockers. When I first started doing spikes, I put them on the part of the leather jacket right here on the shoulders because I would always be touched fine and like grabbing my shoulder, and I got really sick of that, and that kind of was a deterrent. And I like the notion of it's there, it looks soft and inviting, but you can't quite touch it without harming yourself. Like it's almost like a protective barrier. And for some reason, that's just kind of what comes to my mind because I've been through so much stuff in my life, and I just feel like I need to protect myself and my energy. It sounds really lame, but like, like, I don't know. I just like that it's kind of a protective force for that object.
So interesting how we both use spikes and it becomes from a totally different place. Well, living with my grandmother, we had this big tree. I can't remember at the moment what they're called, but you probably all seen them, the ones with the trunk and it has spikes all over. So we had one, and it was just the most amazing thing to see. We had all types of fruit, vegetables growing everywhere. So it was I tried to reminisce and I really love the textures of nature because they are irregular, they're not perfect, and that's what makes them so beautiful. And I kind of try to mimic that sometimes in my work. And for me, the spikes, it's just trying to remember that time living with my grandmother. Also, framing here is very expensive. It's very affordable, but I should have learned when I was over there. So when I started showing here, I went to frame one time, and I was like, yeah, let's go frame the work. And it was so expensive. I think I spent like $200, and I was like, this is insane. Like, no. So I stopped framing, of course, and that's when I started using panels because it looked nice. So I had this piece that was a braid with a hand, and it had like little spikes coming out of the braid. And I was like, it's missing something. And I was like, this would look so good with the frame. And back home, my cousin who fixes hard machinery used epoxy clay to kind of like when there's no tool or something to fix it, just put epoxy clay on it. And that would fix it. So he told me like, this is a very durable material and you could mold it, air dry, and it's very sturdy. And I started using it in Mexico just as a hobby, just to mold things. That's like the hobby. And while doing this piece here, I was like, I remember that. And I was like, I'm going to do this as a frame. And that's when I started incorporating it on my frames to give it that little extra.
Abby, if I could ask you, so we're kind of sitting in front of three beautiful works of yours, all seemingly self-portraits. Could you tell us a little bit about those portraits and your influence and how those kind of came to be?
Of course. So you can see there's several pieces that are ocean themed, these two and those two. So that was from a show I did last year at San Jose at Macla. And it was a 4-person show. The show was called Mírame. And last year was very hard for me. I went through a divorce, and, he was my only support here because all my family is in Mexico. So I was just stranded here alone, totally alone. And then economically also, it's just like I relied so much on him and just being in this space. And I was just in a very dark space. And I remember talking to a friend, and they asked how I was feeling, and I was like, I don't know. Like, honestly, I don't know what I'm feeling. There's so many emotions that I can't really identify them. And they said something very peculiar, like, just let the weights of the feelings take you. And that really spoke to me. And I was like, you're right. Because sometimes we try to make ourselves feel better or ignore them and be like, no, I'm good. And you keep going with life, and you kind of just push those feelings down. And as artists, we're like, hell no, let's bring them all out. And what are we going to do with this? How is this going to help me with my work? So I hadn't been invited to the show a couple of months before. So I was like, this is a great opportunity to kind of talk about those feelings, about dwelling, about sadness, about all these emotions, but also kind of overcoming them, like self-care and being kind to yourself. And that last one it's called A Love Letter to My Friends. And it's just like, it made me realize I wasn't actually alone, like all my friends showed up for me, and it was just amazing, to know that I wasn't actually alone, and kind of just like coming out of those emotions, pulling yourself out. And I think the first one I did from that series was the one over there and with the snake. So you can actually see the emotion there. It was 5 days after my breakup, and I was like, I'm going to be corny, and I'm going to take a picture of myself while I'm crying. And it took a while to kind of look back at that picture. And because, it just made me remember those feelings. But it was very also empowering once I got to live up to it and claim it, So all that sadness kind of made me realize that I was strong enough to overcome these feelings. And once I was finished with the piece, I was like, I did it. So I reclaimed my power. So it was very interesting. That was like that series. And this one was for a show I did about women's rights 2 years ago, with everything that's going on at the moment. So I think it was very important also. It's my work, a lot of it's just a play about being vulnerable and also empowerment. So it's also like me showing myself in a vulnerable state that is also like with a very harsh look, like I claim who I am. You don't get to choose over my body. And, that's why it also has the spikes.
Abby's a badass. But it does come off in the work, like the very stirring, like you can feel the emotion when you look at it. And it's very hard to achieve that like raw, authentic emotion in art, and I think you definitely achieved it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, very much. Right. I think staring into your eyes is just very powerful. Sort of very kind. Conversely, Rissa, if you could talk a little bit about the scratchboard, like how you came to scratchboard, and then how you work with that. But then also we're kind of left with these very kind of intimate moments we're kind of peering into. We take a voyeuristic kind of approach when we're looking at those. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So answering that first part, I got into scratchboard mostly because as a teacher, if you remember, like maybe in elementary school, they had those rainbow underneath the black and you would scratch it off and make cutesy little kid art. Well, they also make ones with the white. And so I wanted my high school students to have a connection to printmaking. Technically, scratchboard is printmaking. It's like kind of like some people agree, some people disagree. But it is kind of like a monoprint. You can only make one, right? And if you mess up, you mess up. And I started out as a printmaker, so I wanted ways to do it in a almost like less technical way where I don't have like a whole space. So when I like lost my studio space, I didn't have the ability to do the whole, block printing, which was my bread and butter. So I found something that was as close to that as I could get. And I realized that connection when I was teaching it to my students. So that answers that. And then in terms of like the kind of voyeurism, it was very intentional. Like I mentioned with the spikes, they're kind of protective. So these window bars that I've created kind of guard that emotion as well, because these are very intimate moments. I believe the first one over there is me putting up my husband's mohawk, and it looks a lot like prayer hands when you do it. And so I kind of made that connection of the intersection between those identities with that one. And we do that quite often. We go to shows pretty much every weekend. He's a musician in a punk band. And so it's kind of like, it's ritualistic almost, it feels like. And then the next one is, it illustrates my first kiss ever, which was with a girl in middle school, Myra. And we got in trouble and, things happen. But for me, it was kind of intimate because I never really looked at my sexuality as like, oh my God, I'm gay. I just kind of always was gay, which is a privilege because I didn't feel like I was fighting anything until when I was 27 and my family realized I was gay. And then the one after that, it's kind of hard to discern if you aren't familiar, but it is the process of making tamales. And every year on Christmas, all of the women in my family, we all contribute. Doesn't matter if, what the circumstances are. If you're a woman, you're in there making those tamales. And so, again, that is kind of like a private, ritualistic family time. And then the last one is just a picture of me, my husband, and my daughter, and I believe my dog as well. It was very hard for me to imagine a future because I'm disabled, I'm very sick. And my husband kind of came into my life at the weirdest time. He came into my life literally 6 weeks post hysterectomy. And I felt kind of like a disconnect because in Catholicism, you're really expected to make babies. Like they really just want you to reproduce and have a normal family. And that was a hard thing for me to overcome. And my husband was like, I don't care. You have a daughter, that will be my daughter. And so for me, that was like a very intimate moment where I realized I do have a family. That is possible for me. I'm surprised as all hell that I married a man, but things happen. But yeah, so they're just barriers to protect.
That's beautiful. I always felt like this wall was taking us both inside your home, but also was an exterior as well. So it served two purposes. We were able to kind of be with you, but also look in as well.
Yeah. And these kind of came from my MFA thesis. They were branched off from that. And that whole thesis was about the home and kind of the next generation of señoras, which is just like older, Latin women, and kind of me reimagining what that looks like, because I felt like I had two separate lives as like, a crazy punk rock dykey chick, and then, hardcore Catholicism. And I was like, no, there's a way to merge these together. And so I was like, forget about that stuff, those notions. And I was envisioning just a home and what my home would be.
So I've talked about this already a little bit, but maybe expand on it a little bit more as an artist, as well as a person, of course, but like some of your biggest challenges in becoming an artist in general, and even your practice now, like some of your biggest hurdles.
It's very hard. Not to discourage you. I don't think I could discourage an artist anyways, because I've tried to quit being an artist so many times. And then I'm like, no, I got to get a real job and do real life stuff. And then I'd be like, but I'm feeling things and I want to make art. So I could never run away from it. I tried. And it's been hard because I've always been really lower class. And that has an impact. You know, you can't buy all the proper supplies. You don't have all these fancy connections. And so you really have to claw your way into this world and find time. You know, they always say we have the same 24 hours in a day, and that's just not true. When you're lower income and you're taking 3 buses at 4 a.m., you don't have that time to create art the way that, you know, you want to. It is a privilege. And to some degree, I developed that for a while, and then I got really sick, became really poor again, and lost that. I lost my studio. I lost, you know, my ability to find the nicer supplies. And ultimately, you know, that affects your work. So it's a lot of ups and downs, but I've met a lot of cool people along the way and had shows with them, and you kind of build those connections within your community. And I think that was the way to overcome my hurdles, was really learning to lean on people, which I am not good at. I am very independent. I don't like accepting help, but I'm learning to overcome that.
Being an artist comes with a lot of challenges. You have to have a hard shell. Like, honestly, I have friends that are artists and they kind of wait, like, oh no, I'm not good enough yet. I kind of want to wait until I'm in this stage. Or they don't deal with the rejection so well and they stop applying. Or when I think one of the biggest mistakes you can do is compare yourself. We all do it. I still do it. And it's like, how are you giving this advice when you still do it? But I try to remind myself all the time, we all have different paths. And it's very hard when you see other people getting opportunities and you're not getting those same opportunities, and you're like, wait, but why? You know, I'm as good as them. Why is this opportunity not given to me? Or why this or why not? And honestly, that's the worst thing you can do, because it's not going to take you anywhere. You have to compare yourself to yourself. You know, like, once you do this piece, you analyze it. Awesome. Thank you. How can I get better the next time? I showed it this space. Thank you. Now I want to grow it and show in this other space. So for me, I try to look at it. I'm trying to look at it in that way, because, you know, when I got here, and, you know, doing group shows or thinking that I wanted to be in a certain type of galleries wasn't really taking me anywhere, where you see all these bougier, fancier spaces and you're like, oh, I want to be there. And you fight really hard. And sometimes you do get in there and sometimes you don't. And for me, I got to experience that even if you do get to those spaces, what are they contributing to you as an artist? How is this space going to help me grow? Is this the right space for me? Because sometimes you're just very like, no, like, I have to get there. Like, just like an ego thing. Because I've done that a lot of times where I'll get rejected and I keep applying because I was like, you don't get to say no to me. But at the end of the day, you're like, wait, is this the right gallery for me though? Like, you have to analyze what type of work they show, because that's going to tell you what type of collector base they have. And then that gives you a better opportunity for your work to sell. So all these things I didn't really get to learn until I was actually, you know, in it. And I didn't go to art school. So all of my experience comes from fashion, which is very different. But, you know, it's something I've gotten to learn while doing this. And lately, I'm just doing the work that speaks to me and how it's helping me grow. And the right galleries are gonna find me. And also learn to say no. It's very hard, you know, it's very hard, especially us, you know, coming from a Mexican background. We try to be kind and say yes to everybody. And sometimes you overburn yourself, you overdo it. And sometimes you're even showing work you're not comfortable with because you just put so much on your plate and then you don't know what to do first, right? So learn to say no when you have so much work. Learn if these spaces are going to do something for you. It sounds silly, but you do have to acknowledge all of this. Like, okay, like, this is a one-day show. Is this really going to do anything for my career? So all of these things are very important. But I think the biggest challenge is you really have to put in the work. Like, honestly, my friends will be amazed when they come over and they're like, what do you do for fun? And I'm like, fun? I'm just in the studio all day. And then I'm so tired to go out. Or, like, let's go out to party. No, because, like, I don't want to feel bad the next day. So I prefer to just maybe one drink and, because I prefer to be proactive. So you really have to put in the work, the dedication.
I will add to that and say that what you said is important as well about everybody coming from different backgrounds. I mean, I have 2 art degrees. Abby has none, and I swear to you, she's doing much better in her art degree than I am, okay? So there's no one path to take. There's no pre-qualifications to being an artist. Like, you can do it in whatever way feels right. You don't have to learn from an institution, although we are in an institution. It's great, I'm sure. But you learn from your peers. You learn from somebody who taught a workshop. Like, there's a billion different ways. YouTube, like, learning is not linear. You can figure out your stuff without a fancy degree that put me $100K in debt. Not paying it. Anyways, so that's important to know. And what you said about saying no is also important, and I am still learning that as well, because once you get opportunities, you don't want to like slow down the momentum. And so you feel obligated to say, I mean, it might be a Mexican thing. Yeah, like you said, like we feel obligated to say yes and just to keep going and push and push. And sometimes you realize that was not the right move. My first gallery show, it was like in some beachy area in LA, some bougie beachy area. I can't remember, maybe Huntington Beach or Laguna Beach or something. And when I went to the show, it was not the vibe. It was not the right move, but it was my first show and I was, young and naive, and it was an opportunity. But you got to learn to say no and really try to envision what you want your artist life to look like, because that's what matters.
And I want to thank you, ladies, so much for coming here, and very touching.
I
Get emotional.
I just want to say, like, I'm always an educator. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out on Instagram. I'm an open book. Just remind me where we interacted. And if you need any advice or anything, or to look at your portfolio, whatever, like, I'm available.
Awesome. Thank you. That's the real deal there. Right here is the real deal. Thank you all for coming. And Matt Luther, thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for coming.